Looks like, yeah.
I'm gonna save my high-risk activities
It's a rough group.
for big super spreader.
There you go.
Listen, Carla, we have
Musical names.
your judgment center at. Showing us the way.
All right, so I think we are ready to start. So, good evening, welcome everybody. I'm gonna welcome you all to our December 9th. This is our joint meeting with the Select Board and Appropriations. And for those who are in attendance who would like to please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, Irfan, if you want to come up and Mike, and just to sit up here so that we unfortunately don't have room for everybody, but it would be good to get, if you guys want.
You're too kind.
Leah, can you hear?
So I'm gonna call the select board meeting to order.
So, and we do have a couple of people at home. We have Leah is from the school committee, and then I think Brendan is there, and Norman, is that accurate? We have remotely. So.
Norman and Leah. Because you're not connected.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this is our budget meeting. It seems like a long time ago. It was a lot warmer when we first met as a joint meeting. I know that Carol has a presentation that's going to be up there momentarily, right?
Well, Susan was connected, but she might
Okay,
be
we're
a
having
little
some-
bit unconnected right now.
We're having some internet
Some
issues.
internet. There we go.
Yeah, but I can't do anything.
Oh,
You know what, can you get on, Carol? I'll get off.
Let me try. I still have a trying to connect sign up there, so I don't know.
Yeah, I can sure.
I've got mine going off my phone.
Yeah, me too. I'm gonna turn off the Wi-Fi and put that on.
Sure, thank you, Meg.
So
Yes.
complicated.
Is there a way to see if the Wi-Fi is working? It
Yeah, the Wi-Fi is giving us issues.
Hold on, I'll check with you about that.
okay. Is that you, Susan? Or is that me?
Managed to,
I think that's you.
it is, but I don't know the
Oh, yeah,
password
that is
to
me.
it.
Are you just trying to mirror it
Um,
through Apple TV?
Do you want to try to pull off my hotspot?
Oh, actually, if I do this, I think we can get that far. It won't go to present, but it will do this. So maybe that will be a little bit helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll begin then. And we'll hope that at some point, maybe that can get a little bit bigger, but we'll see. All right, so first I want to start by thanking everyone for being here on a cold December evening. And this may feel to some of our audiences to be a little bit out of order. And by that, I mean that we still have 4 budget presentations that we'll be seeing tonight. But we really do have a very good idea of where we stand right now. And we wanted to share that with appropriations and with the select board. Before I begin, I just want to let folks at home know that we have been having these meetings since September. We've been meeting with appropriations. We've been meeting with members of the select board. We've been meeting with our town employee counterparts. And I think that the process has been very collaborative along the way. And so I'm grateful for that. I want to thank my team in the Hopkinton Public Schools. All of those directors and building principals have been working on budget since September, and as you know, it was a tricky year to open school when we are short bus drivers and cafeteria staff and crossing guards, and when we have test and stay and COVID concerns and all of that going on. So you hate to think that all of those things and budget are competing with teaching and learning, but this year that is the truth as to what was happening. So we'll get going in the budget presentation. This is kind of a little precursor, I think, to what you'll see next week. So this is our meeting of the FY23 budget, and we have our 3 boards here with us tonight. As we began to put the budget together, we got a budget message from the select board And it was a budget that was more conservative than what the Hopkinton Public Schools have experienced in the last couple of years. So when we went to put this budget together, we really did, as a school district, approach this with fiscal responsibility, we think, and I hope that you'll see that in our budget tonight. That said, we believe that we are maintaining Hopkinton's exceptional academic and extracurricular programs. And I think when you take a look at what Mrs. Rothermick will show you tonight, you're going to see that we are offering curriculum and instruction that meets the needs of all of the learners in the Hopkinton Public Schools. We have academic needs, behavioral needs, mental health needs, social emotional needs, and I think we've tried very hard to ensure that kids are getting what they need, all children. And finally, naturally, we will be supporting our school improvement plans. It's probably very difficult for you to, oh, hold on, I might be reconnecting. Let's see. We are, maybe we'll be able to present. Doesn't seem to be too happy about that. All right, so this budget was built on these student projections, and if you're wondering where they came from, we had hired a couple of years ago, a demographer, Dr. Arthur Wagman, who put these numbers together for us. And we chose his cohort survival numbers, not the numbers that include new housing or any of that. And so this is probably the most conservative projections that Dr. Wagman has given us. The FY22 budget was built for 3,998 students. If we look at where we are today, we have 4,026 kids in the Hopkinton Public Schools. If you look at our numbers for this year, we should have 78 students in the preschool. We have 86 students in the preschool, and that number is climbing. And so you're going to see that we are budgeting next year for an additional preschool room as well. And with all of that said, I will let Mrs. Rothermick take over.
Thank you. I apologize for the lack of being able to connect. We're trying all kinds of things, but it doesn't seem to be working. So the FY22 operating budget was $53,966,000. What we are looking at now is our draft budget request is a salary increase of $2,007,000 and a expense increase of $1,141,000 for a total increase of $3,149,000 or 5.8%. And we do recognize that this is above the guidance that was given by the select board and town manager. However, this is where we are at this time. As we go through the salaries, the beginning was $43,397,000. Our contractual obligations are $1,398,000 and staff requests of $608,000. As we go through, again, our salary contractual for existing staff is $1,398,000. Special education has a request of $328,000, staff requests 9.1 FTEs. Instructional cost and enrollment growth of $129,000, which is 2.0 FTEs. And FTEs are full-time equivalents for anyone that is listening. Instructional program enhancements of $123,000, which is 1.0 FTE. And support of $26,390, which is another 1.0 FTE. Again, that gets us to our salary increase of $2,007,000. As we go through each detailed request for student services, it is a 1.0 FTE for teaching, 7.7 FTE paraprofessionals, 0.2 FTE for speech, 1.0 district-wide nursing, with a 0.8 FTE in teacher of the visually impaired reduction. Instructional cost enrollment growth represents Elmwood a 0.1 FTE, middle school a 0.3 FTE, high school a 0.6, and ESOL a 1.0 teaching. Instructional program enhancements is the 1.0 FTE social emotional learning director. And the administrative support facility enhancements is a 1.0 middle school library para and a few additional clubs that were requested for the middle school.
All right, and again, I apologize for the size of the screen. Just so you know where we are in terms of our English learners, the average caseload per teacher is approximately 30 students. That's actually very high for an ESOL teacher. At Marathon, currently we have 127 English learners. At Elmwood, we have 80 English learners, and at Hopkins, we have 30 English learners across the district right now. And as a point of reference, you can take a look at that chart, and you can see the growth in Hopkinton's English learners and students whose first language was something other than English over the past 7 years. So you can see where we were in 2014-15. Our percentage of English language learners district-wide, there was only 1.4% of all of our students were English language learners. Today, it's as high as 6.9%. The number of English language learners district-wide in 14-15, we had 48 students. Today, we have 281 students. In 14-15, the percentage of students who had a first language other than English across the entire district, 3.2%. Today, it's 19.1%. And just so you can see the numbers that correlate to that, the number of students who have a first language other than English across the district, in 14-15, it was 111 students. Today, 765 students in Hopkinton have a first language other than English. So when we talk about needing to add ESOL teachers each year, we wanted to be able to illustrate by student population that need.
Okay, moving on to expenses. We have an expense increase of $1,141,000. And the breakdown for that are contractual inflation and current services actually represents a decrease of $25,000. In student services is an increase of $1,094,000, which is representative of out-of-district tuition and contracted services. Instructional cost, enrollment growth, and replacement cycles is an increase of $73,000, which is in transportation. And you can see that instructional program enhancements and admin support and facility enhancements are zero. Looking at that first line, the contractual inflation and current services, what we've been able to do is increase our revolving offsets for this year. In transportation, we increased the bus fee revenue offset by $50,000. In building and grounds, we increased $100,000 from the building use revolving. And the increase in other accounts, regular education of $46,000, building and grounds of $26,000, athletics at $11,000, and technology at $11,000, represents the offset going from an increase in offset of $150,000 and an increase in other accounts gets you to that negative $25,000. For the student services, that represents a $1,408,000 increase in out-of-district tuitions, $38,000 increase in transportation and miscellaneous other small increases, and that has been offset by an increase in the use of circuit breaker by $358,000 for a total increase of $1,094,000. The instructional cost, enrollment growth, and replacement cycles again through transportation. This is the addition of one bus at $73,000. The other buckets are zero. So adding the two together, the salary and the expense lines, gets you to the first line, the contractual inflation and current services, an increase of $1,373,000. Special education, $1,422,000. Instructional cost enrollment growth at $203,000. Instructional program enhancements of $123,000. And the administrative support and facility enhancements of $26,000 for a total requested increase of $3,149,000. When you look at this in terms of percentages, the contractual inflation in current services represents an increase of 2.5%, special education at 2.6%, the instructional cost and enrollment growth at 0.3%, instructional program enhancements at 0.2%, and the admin support at 0.05%. Again, the requested increase right now is at 5.8%. As a matter of reference in terms of where we are in the budget process townwide, so this is the school committee's piece of the pie that is townwide. Then it goes and is folded in with all other departments. And the mechanics of the funding falls to the town manager and his team. One of the pieces that we have talked about in terms of the mechanics of funding is this Special Education Reserve Fund. And this is allowed through MGL Chapter 40, Section 13. And the Special Education Reserve Fund basically is allowed to offset and buffer these widely fluctuating special education costs that can happen. The fund can be established through a vote of the school committee, which actually was completed a few years ago, then the select board and town meeting. And town meeting would vote to appropriate the funding. Once this fund is established, appropriations out of the reserve fund can be made by a majority vote of the school committee and the select board.
Are you ready for capital? All right, moving on to our capital requests, just so that you can see them tonight, so you can sort of see the whole package.
So what has been voted by the school committee is a high school auditorium and stage lighting upgrade of $325,000, district-wide IDF switches of $75,000, wetlands order of conditions of $60,000, air handling unit replacements of $473,000. There is a line in here for increasing the funding potential for the Hopkins and Middle School roof project. Due to supply chain issues, we are having difficulty securing material. So that is put there as a placeholder that could potentially be discussed in future meetings. And lastly, a solar and battery storage purchase for a total capital request of $7,222,000. The solar and battery storage purchase actually can generate revenue through Eversource Smart Incentive Program, which would represent revenue of $6,287,000. In addition, there would also be the savings, utility savings in the operating budget that then can be directed to the classroom. So the total taxpayer cost, if we were to purchase the solar and battery, would be $935,000. One slide, right? Yeah. So there are other procurement options instead of purchasing, which is getting the solar and battery through a power purchasing agreement, which would still land you with the same capital request. It would reduce the savings in terms of what can be changed within the operating budget, but it is another way of looking at this with potentially of not incurring debt.
Now we can go to the left. Whoops. Here we go.
So this presentation really is just to show again, as Dr. Kavanaugh noted, we are a little ahead of the game because we still have a few more budget presentations from the elementary schools. This does represent their requests, all in an effort to get a number to the town sooner than later so that they can begin the mechanics of funding all departments and continuing to march toward town meeting.
So, with the solar and battery purchase option, would the town or the schools be receiving solar renewable energy credits as part of the generating, the funds generating?
Right, so the town would be receiving the revenue, and so the thought, and I'm working with Tim O'Leary on this and Chris Hammonds, the thought is to ensure that we get enough revenue through the SMART program that it offsets the debt.
Well,
the goal is to make this taxpayer neutral.
Right, so could you expand on the Eversource piece there? Because I have solar, and every year we sell SRECs, solar renewable energy credits, and that makes us, we get a nice check at the end of the year. That's separate and aside from Eversource. So the SMART piece, is that different from the SREC?
Yeah, so there's several different, and I'm not quite the expert in the actual revenue piece. This is using a consultant that put together. There's different blocks that you get into when you install solar, and depending on that block, it will be the revenue that you're able to get. So what we're looking at is actually being in what's considered the SMART revenue incentives from Eversource.
Okay. And does that continue in perpetuity?
Each block is different.
Okay.
I think I had some of the same questions. It's just in what I understand is that municipalities and school districts are different kind of programs. But like you, I have solar panels, and I wanted to talk about SRECs, but I think they might use slightly different terminology. But it's the same idea that you get credits, and you also get the energy savings.
Right.
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 And what we're presenting is that combining the energy credits and the energy reduction cost savings that would pay for the capital costs.
Gotcha.
Can I ask, it's in the same vein, because I also have solar panels, and although we've made back all our money from buying panels originally, it took 5 years, so I just wanted to make sure we would buy these with a loan of some sort, but we would make back enough to pay off each loan each year. Is that the idea? Because we're not gonna get $6 million back right away.
Right, so the beginning years, the first maybe 5 years, we may be upside down, and then in the other years, we would be right side up of the debt.
And how long do we expect that to take before we start making the gravy?
So because there's multiple projects, so for instance, the middle school roof, we would be right side up in 8 years. Seven years for Hopkins. They're all a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Just piggyback off of Amy, that my understanding when we discussed it before is that the money that we're getting from the panels themselves would pay for the debt service, so that it's not incurring additional cost to the town. Did I say that right?
That is correct. However, at the end, it pays more than what the debt is. In the beginning years, because of interest, now, of course, this all does depend on the actual structure. If the interest is very low, then you may be right side up sooner than later. So, you know, there are a lot of mechanics and moving pieces to that in terms of what exactly would be that debt service.
Okay.
So I think you're gonna get questions on that at town meeting, so be sure you have a slide just to explain
Yeah.
how that's all gonna work. Cause a lot of us have solar in town and we'll have the same question.
Yeah, I think once we get more information on the actual mechanics of the debt, will be helpful, and that's something that we're still doing research on.
Towards that, I would like to see, I know you haven't really figured out the real specifics or interested about, would there be a special account specific to this? Like, I can give an example, was it 10 years ago, you know, we did it for the schools, and then 5 years later, they had to replace the roof because it wasn't installed correctly, or they had to do a lot, 500,000. So if we had a similar problem that you had to do some kind of repairs, is there a fund where it's all part of this solar fund, or is it, you know, I'm not saying you have to answer that, but I'm saying things to think about, how it's set up, so we know, you're kind of saying it's not gonna cost the taxpayers over time anything, but can it be set up a certain way, so that's, here's the fund for it, and we can kind of see specific, or is it just, here's revenue coming in, and here's what we paid, and I would like to see it aligned to this project.
Yeah, and again, the mechanics of that really would be worked out with the town.
I have a question. You mentioned that you were above the requested limit of the select board message. Do you have that delta?
It's about 1.2 million.
Great, thank you.
Just kind of curious, because I have been sitting in on the meetings, that the special education piece of this is pretty much the whole chunk. I'm just curious, between the 11 FTEs and the expenses for the transportation and schooling. If we didn't have that, if that was flat, what would the increase be? It seems like it's almost just slightly above, the salary increases, the contractual agreement, which was 3.7. So would it have been?
Right, so
less than 4.
the slide that is up now, you can see that the total increase that we're looking at right now is 5.8%, and 2.6% of, or 2.6 of that build is just student services. So these are, as we all know, mandated costs to serve the students and meet their needs.
How is the plan, I like the idea of the stabilization account for special ed. How is that envisioned I imagine that doesn't help us this year, but how is it envisioned to help us over time, just for the public's edification?
So the way a reserve fund would work, if the town was able to create a fund and fund it, appropriate funding in there, as a for instance, we're looking at an anomaly this year of an increase in out-of-district tuitions of 1.4 million, as a for instance. If there was money appropriated into that reserve, then that increase could be paid for out of that reserve. And what you're looking to do, obviously special education can go up and down. By utilizing that reserve, you're trying to just flatten the line a little bit, without having a budget going up and down and your base going up and down all the time. Excuse me.
So would there be a proposal to put money into that fund this year, or this year because it's gone up so much, we would leave it empty?
So again, the mechanics of actually funding it would really fall to the town as they look at the revenue picture and where all the budgets are in terms of whether money could be appropriated to that fund and spent in the same year. So,
Susan, do you know if the vote that school committee took, I think in 2018, to do our part to create this, is that still hold, or would we have to revote that?
you would not have to revote it.
And I'm sorry, is that just a vote to participate in the creation of it? What was the vote? What were the mechanics of the vote?
To actually create the
So-
reserve fund.
So it's just sort of agreeing to collaborate to create this fund?
So there's 3 votes that have to happen, the select board, the school committee, and then town meeting to create the reserve fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I don't know this. Has the select board taken a vote on this?
Not yet.
So maybe we could put that on a future agenda to discuss.
By taking the vote, we're not funding it, we're just creating the account and talking about funding it in the future.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Susan, on the warrant in the year, if it were say this year, would we have 2 articles, one to create the account and then one to fund it? Does the town meeting have to vote to create it as well, or are they just going to fund it?
Town meeting would have to approve the creation of the account. And then if the revenue picture shows that there is money that could be appropriated into the reserve fund, then town meeting would do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. After that, once the reserve fund, once there is money in there, then the school committee and the select board could jointly spend that without further going to town meeting.
Okay. So just to play the scenario forward, next year, if we see an unusual spike, as we are doing this year for special ed, in the budget process, we could work together with the select board to vote to, I guess, transfer or tap into that fund,
It
whatever
would
language.
be
we
another
need.
funding source similar to how you use your revolving.
Okay.
So that would be a funding source that would offset those increases.
Okay, thank you.
Looking to make sure there aren't any questions online there.
I haven't seen any.
Susan, can I ask you one question about the circuit breaker? Because we have such a spike in special ed this year, does it mean next year our circuit breaker is going to increase?
Next year, the circuit breaker, it's always a year in arrear, a year behind. So our claims will increase next year, actually. So these are the costs for 23.
Yep.
So it would be 24
Okay,
before you would see that increase.
so that's a little bit of a buffer, perhaps, if we don't have another
Yes.
spike. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, either from out there or? Does not look like anything. Oh, Miriam, go ahead.
So you mentioned that it would be a buffer. Exactly how do you envision that next year's money that would sort of account for the spike this year would necessarily be earmarked or protected to make sure it's built in and not sort of the increases just carried forward? Do you understand my question?
Say it again?
Okay. In next year, circuit breaker funds, we will get some advantage for the fact that we had a spike, a hit this year, right? So how do we protect the taxpayers' interest and use that money to fortify the budget and not just simply raise the budget this year and then again next year? How do we earmark that
So there,
circuit breaker to be protective of the taxpayer?
So there's a law around the use of circuit breaker. What we receive this year, we have to spend the following year. So you cannot keep continuing to carries circuit breaker, you need to use it.
Okay, I understand that. But is there some mechanism whereby it would minimize the increase next year?
Well, we've increased the use of circuit breaker for the budget for this year based on our receivable. And as the receivable goes up again, because of that spike, we would again have to increase the use of circuit breaker, because again, you need to, by law, use that money.
Yeah, I understand that you have to use it.
I think I understand a little bit of what you're asking. It has to do with the expense piece. Is that in terms of like the out-of-district tuitions, the number that we're having, number of kids we have out-of-district varies from one year to the next. And if I recall correctly from Dr. Zaleski's presentation, we actually have fewer kids out-of-district going projected for next year than we do for the past year. Is that?
That's correct.
But the amount of tuition money per child in some cases, because of the needs of those particular children, is greater. So it is possible that next year, some of the children who are out of district their needs might shift. They might be in a different program. They might be back in district, et cetera.
Yeah, I totally understand that, thank you. I guess I'm just looking for that additional piece of transparency so the public knows that the money we're getting next year as circuit breaker funds for the increased hit this year is somehow built into the budget process going forward, so that we don't just keep building the increases and the circuit breaker just sort of adds to the top.
But the circuit breaker is an offset, so it's, again, the tuitions went up by 1.4 million, but the budget is increasing is 1 million, because we increased the amount of circuit breaker that we offset that change. So while the tuitions went up 1.4 million in gross,
Yep.
the net impact to the budget is 1,040,000 because of the offset. Now, tuitions next year or in another year could go down.
Yep.
But again, by law, we would be required to spend the circuit breaker, so there could be an opportunity where the tuitions come down, as Nancy said, maybe we're able to bring students back. You would still need to use that increased amount of circuit breaker you received for the higher tuitions the year prior.
Okay, you set up my question really perfectly. Thank you. So in that case, in some magical case where the costs came down, would your overall budget come down accordingly?
Yes.
Okay, that was really my question and I didn't ask it correctly.
Yes.
Thank
No,
you.
I follow what you're reading now.
Any other questions? If there are not any other questions, or anything else that either of you want to add, we could roll into our budget presentations.
I think that's fine.
So, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for all the work along the way, truly.
Everyone's smiling.
All right, so we are gonna, our student council representative will be here a little bit later, but do we wanna go ahead and start with, Mrs. Dubois? Do you wanna come up and do,
Sure.
marathon first?
Where would you like me to go?
So,
I can see.
I don't wanna,
Yep.
you wanna move, and we'll follow directions.
do you wanna
Okay.
come up over?
Okay. Okay, super, thank you.
And I don't know if you wanted to stick around and listen to the preschool story part of, oh, you wouldn't have that, Karen did in her budget.
Karen did.
Oh, yeah.
But I know it.
Yeah.
You're welcome too.
Yes, everyone's welcome to stay.
We'll watch from home.
Hey, and we adjourn.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah, I was thinking
I'll
about
make a
calling on
motion
you
to
to talk
adjourn
about
second.
budget.
okay.
I just don't have the numbers in front of me for that.
All in favor?
Okay.
I'm gonna listen.
Okay, thank
Take care.
you.
Thank you.
I'll watch
Stay
it
warm.
on the agenda.
Okay.
Good evening. It's nice to see you again. So here we are, for the budget for next year. Each year it just comes around so fast. I don't know if it feels that way to you. But for Marathon, we have been well supported in the past years. So in terms of looking towards next year, we don't have any staffing requests. That's for our general education population. We have great things in place that you've supported, an ELA tutor. The director has moved to, the ELA coach has moved to the director position. So we are in good shape, if you will. The need for us, as you heard from Dr. Zaleski's presentation, is with the preschool program. So while that's technically not in our budget, I feel that's part of our school. So that's part of my thinking as I move forward. When we look at what next year will look like for Marathon, we're projected for K1 to have 562 children. So the forecast is a little less than what we have now for first grade. Right now we have a little over 300. And next year we should have 290. So we're able to accommodate that with ease. It sounds ironic, 290, 300, we've got that, but we do. For kindergarten, the forecast projection there is 272. So we do not need to adjust divisions at those grade levels. We'll maintain the 14 first grade classrooms, the 13 at kindergarten, and we're doing quite well with that. When we look at supplies, there's a slight increase for our supplies. So that supplies are up, let me look here. I didn't put the percentage, but Susan, you can help me. It might have been up maybe 4,000 to 5,000. What we had done is depleted our stock, if you will. All of our supplies, we didn't use different things last year during the pandemic. We used different materials that were sent home with our remote students. So in terms of our overall supplies, we've sort of emptied the backups, if you will. So that accounts for the increase. Not that we're ordering anything spectacular. We do use a lot of things, consumables at our level. We use a lot of dry erase markers. We use a lot of things such as that. And while we work on using technology quite often, we still use a lot of paper at our level because that's what's best for children to really get that, writing tool in their hand and write. And we have lots of different paper that we'll use for that, from chart paper, construction paper, to lined paper, to unlined paper. So if you ever wonder, why all that paper? There's a lot of writing and drawing. Kindergarten was actually working on wordless books and how they tell stories today. So how great is that? So we use a lot of paper, and that is fantastic. So it's a very short presentation because I'm not asking for just a slight increase with the supplies. So our budget next year for supplies would be $46,205, which the year prior, I could look right there for that. Susan might be faster than I am, but I'm gonna look
Yeah, I
too.
was having difficulty because
Okay.
of the whole internet thing, but your general supply account actually went down 7.3%.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking the wrong way. You know what, overall, I think our overall budget went slightly increased, but that's because of contractual obligations, which you saw in the slides prior. So when you look at why is that, that's what we do each year, make sure we meet those contractual needs. So that is what we've got. We are so thankful to have that building. We could not function without that building where we are now for space. It is wonderful. It's amazing when people come into our building, they just comment how warm and welcoming it is. I know the size is quite large, but it was just built with such intent. It's wonderful.
A question. Thank you very much. Great, and good to see you always. Can you comment on like this year's enrollment? I wondered from the uncertainty the parents might have felt from the 2020 to 2021 school year. Did you see that impact either kindergarten or first grade enrollments this year? Did you see people holding back, sending in kindergartners for 2020 to 2021, and then you have kind of older than usual kindergartners this year? And is that maybe why kindergarten might be forecast to go down a little next year?
So I anticipated that we'd have a higher number of students who were held out because of the pandemic, and it really is comparable to years past. We often have children that have a summer birthday and parents will question if their child is ready. You know, you cannot rush childhood. I'm a strong proponent of that, so I will talk with families, and you know your child best. And if it's the right reason, then families should make that decision. But if the reasoning is so that your child's the top of the class and they're the leader, it's not always the case. Sometimes the oldest presents as the youngest, and the youngest presents as the oldest. But to answer your question, Joe, we have, less than 10 that are sort of a little older than they should be, and it's comparable to years past. Sometimes families, they have moved recently, there's a lot of change, they want consistency for their child, or based on family situations and just how their child presents, they feel that it's a year would benefit them. So we have not seen exorbitant class size, because parents were concerned about that this year, that kindergarten would be excessively oversized, if you will, and it is not. In our first grade, we've had over 300 before. I think our largest was 314 once when we were at Marathon. This, from when I wrote this, we had 2 children start yesterday, so we have 2 more. We no longer have 20 to 22 in a class. We have 21 to 22. So we're in good shape in regards to that. There's not a large group coming in that's sort of upending that balance.
Okay. Maybe it's a little outside the budget presentation, but can we get a quick update on like the expansion? Because haven't we funded expansion of Marathon?
Yes.
Also? Okay.
So we thank you for the town for approving an addition to Marathon. We have meetings every 2 weeks where we talk with our OPMs, which are Colliers, and the architects, which are DRA, and they are the original architects, so they are very familiar with the building. And right now, it was in the design phase, if you will. What is it going to look like? We need a stairwell at the end. It'll be a little smaller, but, loads and capacity, that's required. So looking at different designs, where does that stairwell go? Probably doesn't sound that exciting, but this is important stuff.
Yeah.
For example, when we've met, one of the drawings is to maintain the light through the hallway. Our building, while it's a large building, the design was such so that there are points that natural light is in the hallway, and it makes it feel bright and airy. And that's something to maintain with a netted stairwell at the end. What does that look like? How do we, where do you put certain doorways, and taking in our fire codes, and where are the tack boards in relation to those doorways. So that's what they're doing now, is designing that. What would that look like? That schematic design, I think, is the official name for it. And they should, the timeline's moving along well. What we don't know is, once we go out to bid, how that will all, I'm not going out to bid, like I can do that, right? Right, but the goal is to break ground at the end of this school year.
Okay.
Construction would begin, so that this addition would be ready for the fall of 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. No, because next year is 22. I know, I'm a year ahead.
Oh,
I'm sorry
23.
about that. Yeah, so it should take 1 year for this
Yep.
addition.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're great.
Yeah, and based on you're already seeing other enrollments, we understand that.
Yes.
When you say you're projecting not as much increase next year, that's all subject to change.
It is.
And you could come back for additional headcount at any
Right.
point.
Yeah. The intent with Marathon was to have class size 17 to 18. We've never been able to do that.
Right.
We're better than we were at center, but we still haven't achieved that yet. And now with preschool, on the slides that talked about preschool, and Dr. Kavanaugh said right now we have 86. At the end of January, we'll have over 90. When you think about that program, it's just reflective of the growth in town. And really, the pandemic has had an impact on these young children. For many of them, this has been half their life.
Yeah.
So early intervention is significant to address the needs of children. That's before they get to the public school. So children that we're seeing now haven't going to the grocery store with your family, those language experiences, interactions with others, those are significant factors that promote development. So the children that we're seeing, when we had the special education presentation, the eligibility rate is trending to 90%, which is significant. We've never seen that. So that's why at the end of the January, we'll have over 90. We typically don't end in June with 90 in preschool. So, yep, we're doing a lot of pep talks. We've got this. We're ready to go.
But still, you're not projecting a big spike in kindergarten for next year. So
No,
is
we
it
are not.
Is it the
No, we are not.
three-year-olds?
So the kindergarten, we plan for a large population. Preschool is a portion of the population. And again, it's driven by special education. So we're seeing more of those students come in requiring that service. But ideally with early childhood special education, you provide that service and then they no longer need that. I mean, that's our goal. It doesn't always happen. I mean, as we saw, there are some special needs that require continuous support as children grow and develop. But some of our earlier developmental needs, for example, we're able to provide that intervention, and then children are able to access the curriculum without that support.
I'm wondering if you're seeing, as you're talking, the early intervention had to have been shut down similarly
Yes.
to the way the public schools were. And are you, some of those children that are coming in then, maybe in a year where they had the early intervention services pushed into their homes and into, that 0
Or
to
Zoom.
3, or
It doesn't
Zoom,
work well
right.
with a 2-year-old on
Well,
Zoom.
that's what I mean. I would imagine they have to have more needs coming in when they hit 3
Yes.
that weren't addressed at the birth of 3.
Agreed. Yes.
I hadn't thought of that until.
Yeah, but I think what we're hearing though too is it's not just the increase to 90 in the preschool isn't the, it's not necessarily an indicator of a larger kindergarten size the next year.
Yes.
It's that
Correct.
more people are opting to use the public pre-K because it has a special education component. Those students would have been maybe in a different preschool in a different year. But because they have those particular needs, they're
Yep.
enrolling in the Hopkinton Integrated
Yes.
Preschool.
Yes.
And in order for you to keep the balance of typical learners and special ed, you're increasing the entire
Well,
size.
we will actually be out of balance
You'll be out, okay.
after, late January and beyond. So we'll be submitting waivers to the Department of Education because just if you've ever been around a handful of 3-year-olds, it's a lot of work. So we're not balancing out with the ratios. We will have more special education than would be recommended in the guidelines. So for that, and it's not just our preschool. This is many preschools.
Right.
This is a common trend across many schools. And we already have families entering the application process for the lottery that we hold in February because they're looking for those spots because they know we have a quality preschool program.
Mhm.
Where in years past, we were trying to solicit people to come to our preschool. Now we have wait lists, which is wonderful. Yeah.
Anybody, I can't see the online, but are they all set, our virtual people? And then anything from either appropriations, any questions, or from the select board?
Pretty good presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Lauren.
you.
Nice to see you.
Yes, yeah, it's nice to see you here.
Oh, sorry.
Welcome, Mrs.
everybody.
Carver.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to see you as well.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to see you all. So my presentation is very simple this year, I'm happy to say. We're expecting, according to enrollment, we're expecting to have, hopefully, or perhaps I should say about 30 less students. So our class sizes, we will continue to have 15 third grade classrooms and 14 second. And so the only thing that will change is the average, we hope. Will go down just a bit. We are currently sitting at 23 in both grades in each classroom. And some are at 23. Obviously, you understand how the average works. And some are a little bit lower, and that's nice for those rooms. Next year, we hope to be around 20 and 21. So those will be nice numbers for second and third grade. And the only personnel request that's on my budget for this school year is for a position that's already actually been filled. So we have sort of hovered around 2 and a little bit more for our wellness team. And that's determined by classroom numbers. And so this year we had a 0.9 wellness teacher, and Lauren shared that the other point over at Marathon. And so to start the year, we had a staff person who was for 3 classes leaving Marathon, making their way leaving Elmwood and making their way to Marathon in the traffic and all the other challenges, and then getting in there to teach some classes. And that person ended up filling a resignation, or a retirement, I should say, of Chris Basil. So when we went to fill the new spot, it became really difficult to fill a 0.9, And we talked a lot about the schedule and how much nicer it would be for everybody if we could please add a .1 to our position and make that spot whole. And in doing so, we were able to have lots of incredibly qualified folks show interest in the position. We hired a wonderful wellness teacher, and so it's a little bit more than $6,000 in an increase, and it's provided it's such a wonderful wellness team, and lots of peace of mind for everybody. In terms of my expenses, somehow they have gone down $73. Which is very precise. And you know I like to look in all of our closets and under every desk and in every empty spot to find materials. And we did just have our librarian, Diane Norby, just retired after many years in the public school system. And she had lots of closets and things in her spot. And our new friend who has replaced her has come in, and I think I collected 900 boxes of paper clips yesterday. So we're able to use what we have, and I'm not asking for more. The only significant, if that is in the budget this size, increase is for $5,000 to fund a March Madness spring activity at Elmwood. Deb Moriarty, our ELA director, brought this one year. She brought, I think it was about 3 years ago, brought this wonderful idea to us, and we really weren't sure how we were going to do it and how we'd fund it. And through the generosity of the HPTA and later with grants, we funded the activity. It's 15 hardcover books. It sounds like kind of, you wonder how it could cost that much. But what Deb does is extensive research to find 15 wonderful, interesting for second and third grade nonfiction hardcover texts that were published within the year. And then she gives every classroom teacher and the librarian a set of books, and it's very similar to the basketball March Madness, where they pair books together. Classroom teachers read paired texts, students vote on the book that they like the best, and you kind of narrow it down until the very end when there's a giant reveal of the favorite book. And there's titles like Snot Otters, and some of them are biographies. And one of the things that Deb sort of brought attention to Elmwood and to the teachers is sometimes a classroom teacher, and I might have been like this myself, you find a genre or an author that you love, and that's what you bring into your classroom. And that's natural, right? But there are children for whom you teach that may not have an interest in those things. And sometimes in early childhood, beautiful picture books are really part of everyone's library, but the nonfiction, it was determined that maybe we needed more. And suddenly, the books came alive in the eyes of every kid. And also the children are sharing the reading experiences. So, once you bring out a book that kids are really going crazy over, they're talking about it in the playground, they're talking about it and they're calling Mrs. Moriarty the book lady. And it just brings this experience that really goes beyond the books. And I asked Dr. Kavanaugh this year, could I please put that in my operating budget to preserve it? Because each year we sort of, at about this time of the year, we say, oh, where am I going to come up with that money? And there's been lots of generous ways that we've made it work, but I just want to, if I'm able, I'd like to include it in the operating budget. And that's it.
Questions? Any online? No. Any questions from either the select board or appropriations? Miriam?
Desperate to know, do you publish a list of all those nifty new?
We have with families, yeah, we have, and sometimes people want to buy them.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have. I'm trying to think if they, I'd have to ask Deb to. I'm not even sure where we put them, but and each year when we first did it, the other thing we thought about doing was just keeping the books. We said if we had the money, we'd just buy all the books, and then because we turn over every 2 years, we thought we could perhaps reuse the titles with the next year. But then it became really obvious that these were books that kids had never seen because they were so new, so that generated an interest that wouldn't happen, 5 years later. But it's a lot of fun. And we do have one video, I think, on HCAM of a big reveal a couple of years ago you could probably find. It's a pretty big
That's
deal.
awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. I'll make sure they're on our website.
I'm gonna be looking for that in March now.
Okay. Well, if we can all be back together, you can come. Anything? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Mrs. Belil? Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you guys. Good evening. So my presentation, like my colleagues, is very brief. Hopkins School looks to be about the same size we are right now. Potentially a few more students, though. We've had 6 enroll over the last couple of weeks. So we're right around 620 right now, which is where we're anticipated to be next year. Right now, our 4th grade classrooms are about 20 to 21. Our 5th grade classrooms are 23, 24 students per classroom. Next year, it'll flip-flop based on the larger class, but about 22, 23 students per classroom if the enrollment stays what it's projected to be. And our expenses are staying level funded as well across the board. So therefore, without personnel or expenses, the increase is, again, due to those contractual obligations. And that is it for my budget presentation. I did want to just give a shout out to Miss Julie Babson, my colleague and co-administrator, our assistant principal at Hopkins School, who will be leaving in a week and a half. She is headed to Belmont Public Schools to become the principal at the Butler School, which is actually the school she was a teacher at prior to coming to Hopkins. So after 5.5 years together, she will be departing in a couple days. So I just would like to give a shout out to her publicly for all of her efforts for the Hopkinton Public Schools. She has been a tremendous colleague of mine, partner in crime, Batman and Robin. So we did our last Batman and Robin together last Friday, which was quite sad. So thank you so much to Julie for everything she's done for the Hopkinton community and the Hopkins School. So we will be in the search for a new assistant principal.
Congratulations to her.
Congratulations to
Yeah,
her. Well
Belmont's-
deserved, well deserved.
Belmont's gain or loss. But
Absolutely.
fighting for her.
Yes.
Questions on the budget?
Only to say to all of you, I mean, thank you for the work to keep, I mean, these are the discipline and the I don't know, the perseverance to get these numbers so low and to, really try to fit into the budget message in the face of growth, in the face of expanding need, and it's just, you've done amazing work, so, thank you so much for the work that you've done.
I agree with all that. Is there anything online, any of our online?
I see nothing.
Okay, anything from the select board or from appropriations, any questions, comments? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is wonderful to see all 3 of you.
That's right. So they didn't ask for very much.
Well, that's, great. That then brings us to the central office, right?
Yes, sure. And I think I will be almost equally as brief, maybe even brief, I don't know. So the central office budget reflects an increase of $473,920. And I will talk a little bit about personnel and expenses. In our personnel, we are increased by $420,617,000. That includes a 1.0 social emotional learning director, and as you know, she is already on board with us. So she was hired technically in FY22. The salary for this year was partially funded from a grant, and then next year we will absorb her salary fully. In terms of the expense account, we have a couple of things there that are kind of weighing in. First of all, the superintendent's professional development is increased by $3,169, and so last year it was at $10,720. This year it's at $13,889. So the dollar amount there is very small. And I think that the next piece of this you actually saw tonight in Mrs. Rothmick's presentation. So what you're seeing is an increase in a single school bus as well as an increase of $27,900 in terms of our contract with Michael J. Conley and Sons. So if you take that money and add it up, you'd come to $101,000, but there's a $50,000 offset there, so the increase is $51,160. And so that's how all of the central money, office money adds up. So not a lot of asks there, but some of them are kind of bigger ticket items when you look at the social emotional learning director and the school bus.
I'm glad we're keeping the social emotional director on board full-time. We need it.
I agree. The increases on the offset for the bus fee, that is, or I'm asking, is that a change in the bus fee itself that is being proposed, or is that a change in just how we're pulling the money?
That's correct, yes. So this is another reflection of where we pulled back on the use of the revolvings because the revenue had changed so much. We gave back almost all of the bus fees in some of these COVID years. You know, we refunded a lot of money. So this gets us back up looking at a better revenue picture.
And the additional bus is across both, we're still looking at the 2 tiers, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Were you
one
gonna
of the
keep
other
going?
pieces of this,
I-
just sort of quickly when you ask that question, we have 3,121 students, or 79% of our kids are actually riding the bus. That's amazing.
That's higher,
Yes.
it must be our highest in a long time.
I think so.
Feels
It might
like
be
it.
caused by the traffic issues
That's
that
right.
we have.
That's good.
Parents are tired of sitting on streets waiting for the traffic to move.
But there's still lots of high school drivers.
True.
Were you gonna ask the next question?
Yes, there are.
My concern with the buses is, I worry, is one definitively going to be enough?
That was my question. I was wondering if that was your question too.
I do believe so. The way the buses are right now, the elementary ones, a lot of them are at capacity, but some of them that have to drive further distances have some room for growth. So if it looks as though there is more crowding, we certainly can be shifting bus stops to some of those buses that do have that capacity.
Thank you.
That was really
Okay,
my
that was-
question. I just know the transportation between the shortage of drivers and everything else, traffic, it's just been a real puzzle this year, and I appreciate all the work on it. Just hoping that we're asking for enough, and if you feel comfortable, then, you know, I feel comfortable, but I'm just asking, because we definitely, we want people to use the bus, we want the buses to be efficient and effective, because our traffic is so difficult. No question, really.
Okay, I don't see anybody online with their hand raised, but are there any questions from our partners here, on appropriations or? All right, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
So, I know Sarah, right?
Yeah.
Is here because Jesse is at a basketball thing tonight, so welcome. Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
So we can move then, I gotta scroll back because this is a thick packet. Do you wanna go ahead, Sarah, and introduce yourself?
Yeah.
And do you wanna go ahead and do the student council report?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so hi, I'm Sarah Bouvier, and I'm a senior, and I'm also president of student council this year. So at the high school this past week, we returned to the mask optional policy, and it's really just been the same as it was during the trial period. Some students have elected to keep their masks on, with many still choosing to take them off. And overall, the transition back into the mask optional period was pretty seamless. On the music front, for the high school, we have our upcoming winter concerts with concert band and jazz ensemble on December 20th and chorus and orchestra on the 22nd. our winter sports season officially began today with girls ice hockey, and boys basketball will be kicking us off at home on Tuesday night. Our clubs are also doing great service work in the next couple of weeks. We have the Red Cross blood drive at the high school tomorrow, where I will be donating blood for the first time. And Habitat for Humanity Club, as well as the Real Life for Life Committee, are having some fun family fundraisers in the next coming weeks. Habitat is hosting a gingerbread house fundraiser this Sunday from 11 to 1, and Relay will be having a cookie decorating party on the 18th from 12 to 2, both in the high school cafeteria. So if anyone's looking for something to do with friends or family soon, those are both really great things to attend. And that's all I really have for the high school tonight, but I'd love to answer any questions that you guys have about the high school or anything student council's doing right now.
Thank you. This is one of the highlights of the meeting for us. We'd love to hear what you guys come in. So, anybody questions?
No, nothing in particular, but thanks for the update. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you guys for having me.
yeah.
Absolutely. It really is truly it's important for us because we get to hear what's going on in the schools from your perspective, but it's also it's nice to hear, and is why we're really here, is just for you guys.
I have a question. How was it with NEASC in the building? Did it change anything or not?
With
Did you
what?
even notice?
The accreditation group that was there this week? did
Oh,
that
yeah.
affect anything?
I had seen a few people kind of coming in and out of classes, walking through the hallways. A few students kind of gave like tours of the school, showing off like some features of different classrooms, but it wasn't really like it impacted lessons or anything like that. So I don't think it really interrupted the school flow or anything like that.
Nice.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You are welcome to stay. I know Jesse is coming as well, but we're
Yeah.
happy to have you if you'd like to, but if you have homework, don't feel like you have to.
Yeah, I do have to head out, but thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
Thank you, you guys too.
That moves us into the superintendent's report.
So I have a few things in the superintendent's report this evening. The first is just the COVID-19 case update. I know that folks have been kind of attentive to it. And, we were wondering how would things look after Thanksgiving. And I will say that we've been pretty active at the Elmwood and Marathon schools. So the nurses in those buildings, especially at the Elmwood School, are conducting an awful lot of test and stay right now. I want to be fully transparent and say that just yesterday morning we were sending letters to the parents at Elmwood saying this is great, even though we have kids who are testing positive, we have not seen in-school transmission. Currently, we have a classroom where there are 3 positive children. So we have been in contact with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They asked us to test and stay by next now all of the children this afternoon. We did that. There were no positive students in that group that we tested this afternoon, but they will be back in for testing in the morning. So we're watching it. All right, just a quick update on where we are with the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Subcommittee. So our anti-bullying plan subcommittee, that we got a subcommittee together several months ago, and we did that because by law, your anti-bullying plan needs to be reviewed every couple of years. I'll just kind of go through our timeline. On June 21st, we had our introductory meeting. We met on July 1, July 9th. On September 7th and September 29th, the administrators got together and did some writing and revision on the document. We had a meeting in between on September 20th where folks could give feedback on the work that the administrators had done. On October 12th, we brought in our subject matter leader for wellness to take a look at the document because there are references to wellness curricula in there. November 3rd, I believe, was the last meeting we had, and then we have taken our revised document and we have handed it off to Murphy, Lamoury, and Murphy for review. They are our legal counsel, so hopefully we will have a revised plan to share with the committee in January.
Great.
An update on the calendar subcommittee. The calendar subcommittee, we broke ourselves into 3 subgroups. One looked at the impact on teaching and learning. A second group looked at, constructed a survey so that we could send something out to families so that we could kind of get a feel for how families and the community and students were all feeling about our current calendar. And the third subgroup took a look at other districts' calendars to see if there were things that we could learn there. Our calendar subcommittee meetings were held on June 28th, August 5th, August 17th, October 19th, December 7th, and we have another one next Tuesday. And we are hoping that next Tuesday we come to some kind of consensus so that we are prepared to make a calendar recommendation to this committee early in January. And that's all I have for you tonight. And who knows, even if we get very lucky, maybe on the 19th of December, we would be able to, the 16th of December, we would be able to help show you the calendar reveal, but we'll see where we are. Great.
Dr. Gam, can I ask a question about the COVID cases?
Surely.
Do you know if there's any connection between any of the Elmwood cases and any high schoolers, or any of the marathon cases and any high schoolers? Because I know there was a concern when we did mask optional that there may be some impact on younger grades. Do you have any awareness of any connections?
We've been watching that, and the answer to that is no. There are no connections between anything that's happened to the high school. And in fact, what we are seeing at the high school is if there is so far to date, if there's a person who has tested positive at the high school, it's a person who has contracted it outside of the high school, typically in their own homes.
Thank you.
I was noticing some, on the Boston Globe's COVID, case tracking page, how the numbers correlate between, age, like certainly the number of cases in the 0 to 19 age range is the highest of all the decades of age up to 80s. But then when you look at hospitalizations, for example, the chart flips, right? And the 0 to 19 is almost negligible compared to the number of cases. And does our health director, do we track? I mean, I'm hoping that our students who do contract aren't getting seriously ill, but do we have any evidence on I know the cases may be high. Are they all asymptomatic, or 10% symptomatic, or are there fevers in 20% of the cases? I don't know if they collect that data.
Yes, I don't know that Sean McAuliffe collects that data. I do know that his department does reach out to families when a student is diagnosed with COVID. And I'm sure that they have conversations with them about, whether they are coming to school or whether they're not coming to school, if they're vaccinated or unvaccinated, when they need to go out and get a PCR or a rapid antigen test, all of that. And I don't know if he follows all of the symptoms based on what his folks are learning in those phone calls. But I wouldn't want to weigh in either way.
Right,
and
okay,
that's certainly his information.
And I know there's kind of, it's a lag, the case count is, the hospitalization would lag after case count. So I'm curious to look at the next two-week period in the Boston Globe data.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, question just kind of related to that is I know that we recently had another vaccine clinic that took place in our schools by the Department of Health, and the numbers were very high. I did also see that the 16 and 17-year-olds, it looks like, are going to be eligible to get their boosters. Are you aware of any upcoming clinics, either for boosters or for any age group, that are going on?
I really don't know what
Okay.
Sean plans, but he and I did have a conversation about how many 5 to 11s, what percentage of 5 to 11s he thinks are vaccinated. And he thinks that we will be over 80%
Wow.
in, like a week's time. So,
Wow.
yes, yeah, well over 80, so, yeah. It is great. Yeah. Nothing could make me happier, truly, yeah.
So, thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions? Welcome, Jessie.
Hi,
You
sorry.
just
Sorry, I was like-
we knew you were going to be late. You just missed Sarah.
Yes,
So,
she was
okay.
pulling out, so I was pulling in.
All right, so that then brings us to, as long as there's anything online, I don't see as well from over there, but brings us down to the school committee chair report. Payroll warrant 22012 is approved, warrant 22-022 is approved, all included in the packet. And then the next piece about the executive session minutes, it did not all occur since we last met, but this is just a requirement that we share publicly which minutes we have approved, and these have not been publicly shared. So the following executive session minutes were approved to release February 25th, 2021, March 11th, 2021, and April 8th, 2021. The following executive session minutes were approved to release with redactions: March 18th, 2021, April 1st, 2021, and April 15th, 2021. And then the executive session minutes for February 4th, 2021 were approved but not released. In addition, we did get some email since last week. We had, I think, 3 emails just with people a little bit nervous about COVID, so it was great that you were able to report out on that. Any liaison reports people have?
Dr. Kavanaugh covered the calendar subcommittee, so.
Okay. All right, then that brings us into new business, but we are way ahead of schedule, so we do not have Ms. Moran here. So do you want to go into the saxophone donation?
Surely. This comes to you from Craig Hay, who is our subject matter leader for music. And so we have a donation of a Yamaha alto sax, and the value of that instrument is $850. It was donated to us by the Petrick family, and we will use it for students who might be in need of an alto sax. And we just need for the school committee to accept this donation, this very generous donation.
So moved.
Second.
So a motion by Meg and a second by Amanda. We are required to do a roll call because we do have hybrid remote participation. So I'm going to start, Leah, with you, because you are down on the end of the table tonight.
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
And I am also an aye, so that passes with great thanks to the Petrie family. So that brings us, we can go ahead and do the, any future agenda items that people wish to throw out there before we.
Well, I mean, obviously, early January, we check in on the vaccination rates at each of the schools and discuss what we want to do. Yeah.
Okay, we can go ahead and do items by consensus, and then we can figure out how to deal with the next piece.
Okay, sure. So as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Meg,
Second.
second by Joe. We'll do a roll call, starting with you, Leah. You're muted.
Aye.
Thank you. Joe?
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
And I am also an aye. So the Upper Charles Trail Committee is on the agenda for 8:30. I would propose that we take our executive session out of order, and that we go into executive session and then come back out in time to do the Upper Charles piece at 8:30. And if we need to continue our executive session, we can do that. So that said, I will seek, and I'm going to read the entire thing because it is lengthy, seek a motion to close the regular meeting with purposes of returning for another agenda item and enter into executive session to comply with or act under the authority of MGL C30A 21A3 specific to conducting strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with the Hopkinton Teachers Association, because having the discussion in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the school committee's bargaining position. Also to comply with or act under the authority of MGL 30A 21A1 to consider a complaint against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. To comply with or act under the authority of MGL C30A 21A3 to discuss strategy with respect to litigation which has been threatened with respect to a claim by parents in connection with an ongoing bullying civil rights investigation, when discussion in open session would have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body. D, to comply with or act under the authority of MGL C30A 21A7 to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law with applicable law being the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 U.S.C. 1232G and MGL C71 Section 34D as to the confidentiality of student information and records in MGL C214 Section 1B regarding an individual's right to privacy, namely the privacy rights of a student, And finally, to comply with or act under the authority of MGL C30A 21A3 specific to the review of executive session minutes for the meetings of July 8th, 2021, July 14th, 2021, and July 22nd, 2021, and then to return back here in public.
Sounds like fun.
Is that a motion from you?
So moved.
Motion by Amanda.
Second.
Second by Meg, and we'll go by roll call, starting with you, Leah.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Meg.
Aye.
Amanda.
Aye.
And I am also an aye. We are entering into executive session at 7:28. Thank you, and thank you very much for coming. to see
Sorry, I couldn't
Nice
make
to
it.
see you. from a brief, couple minutes in executive session to jump ahead, if it's okay, to our 8:30. We were ahead of schedule, so we broke earlier than we anticipated, but would like to come back now for the Upper Charles Trail Committee.
Sure.
You guys want to come
Sure.
up?
Where would you like us to sit?
Let's sit right there so we can hear.
Sure. Here or here, doesn't matter.
It's nice to see you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for breaking, seeing us.
Yes, thank you.
I'm glad there was no traffic running down here.
Oh, well, it's nice to see you folks again. So again, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jane Moran, Chair of the Upper Charles Trail. And before I introduce our engineers to you, I just want to spend a minute or two just giving a brief history of what the Upper Charles Trail, how we started and how we got where we are today. So we were appointed by the Select Board in 2012. And the original charge was to build, design, engineer, and construct a multi-use trail from the town of Milford to the town of Ashland. And we have to include the Center Trail in that parcel. So we got busy right away. We started with hiring of the Conway Group, which gave us, the takeaway from the Conway Group was that we realized that we have to use mostly town open space because we do not have a derelict rail bed long enough to get us that route. The second piece was that we realized that we were going to have to consult with an engineering firm that really had the expertise because of the nuances and the complications of building such a complicated and huge project. It really is a huge project for the town. So from there, we went out and after a lot of investigation, we hired and been very, very happy with VH Group. They have a ton of expertise and history in building trails all around New England and probably the country, I believe.
Yeah.
And so we've been very, very fortunate in that route. In 2014, I remember being at the town meeting when we purchased the Irvine Tadaro property. And with that, it was presented as it was going to be multi-use for the town. Although I think on all of our minds back then, we knew it was probably going to be for the schools, but that was not decided in any way, shape, or form. It was just very premature, but that was out there. From there, in 2017, and Joe can remember this, I think it was 2015, maybe it was 17, 16, somewhere in there, we attended the joint planning board meetings with the school board. And at that time, there were many discussions about a trail through the outside of the setback areas of the school. And it was always, it was really discussed at length. And it was determined at that time that it is an allowable use. So we were very, very excited. Before that time, we had looked at multiple avenues to get through the school district, but to the downtown, to the center school. But we hadn't gotten to this piece. So then when this piece of property came available, we became very excited because then we could see an alternative route. In addition, we had already looked at other alternatives to the west side of the property, but we had run into roadblocks with and not being able to get easements. So this piece looked very attractive to us at the time. So we continued. So why are we here tonight? We're basically looking for the support to partner with the school committee so that we can get this done. Basically, we're in our minds, we want to make this the safest, the best trail, not only in the state, but in the, I'm going to say the country, but to be practical, we want to make this the best possible trail possible. And we feel that by partnering with all of the different towns, boards, and committees in town,
by coming together as a collective group, we can probably make this happen. So having said that, I would really like to introduce you to two members of our team. Our third member is not able to be here tonight. That would be Matt Chase, but this is Christine Chapeau from VHB.
Hi.
And our very own Dave Del Torrio, our town engineer. And they have been
Hello.
extremely valuable and necessary, and I can't thank them enough for their support. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thank you. Again, thank you for the summary, Jane. And again, I wanted to urge how important it is to, the Upper Charles had a meeting last night, as public outreach, as part of this public outreach, and as, part of that process, we're here before the school board tonight, because school board's a big, they're a big stakeholder in this project, along with the Upper Charles Trail Committee, and all the other, we have certain boards and committees, the planning board, where we're gonna need an amendment to the site plan approval for the marathon school, to actually show when we get to that point. That'll be the next thing we explain, is kind of that design process, how we go from concept to real on the ground desktop kind of design, where you hit all the finite details about all these concerns that we're hearing. How do we address them in the design itself? So again, these are very early beginning stages of this big, long process. I'd like to continue collaborating with the schools throughout the whole process, especially for the segments as shown right now going through. They're identified as segments 5 and 6, which are the Marathon School site and I believe the Tadaro site, which isn't developed yet. We understand through conversations with, I've been talking with Tim, some with Kathy, very preliminary discussions with Carol, maybe a couple months ago when you guys were looking for OPMs, just about this process. And in a couple months we'll be having these kind of discussions. Next week, you folks will hear from the MSBA, I believe, hopefully get the approval. You have town meeting, I think, placeholder or capital article for possible feasibility study. I don't know if that's a possibility. Maybe you hear from, again, I'm just trying to figure out our design timeline and the school's feasibility process. And they'll be close, I think, from a design or feasibility study where we can collaborate on a lot of the, preliminary layouts that might be functional through the property. So I understand, we understand, the school's gotta go through a feasibility study like you did for the marathon school. You gotta look at all different sites, you gotta look at using the Elmwood School site, you gotta look at using, we're in no way saying schools are going on this property. We understand that's not the case, but from a planning perspective, working with the town manager, very planning conscious, whatever possibilities that could be for this town-owned property, we're keeping in mind here. So we're trying to touch all the different groups and committees and boards that might have some sort of other use on this site. So again, that's just kind of why we're here. Sorry, running over here. My notes are all mixed up. And it was important just to touch on again what Jane was mentioning. This property wasn't looked at for the trail alignment originally because it wasn't town property. And there were other alignments that they investigated and looked at, and they ran into roadblocks, and they ran into easement issues, and they ran into private property issues. And then this property came up for town meeting to purchase. And then all of a sudden you have this huge property on Hayden Row where it becomes town property. And that was one of their primary functions, was to look for town property for this trail. So
Different alternatives.
so there were alternatives looked at prior to this. And even the plan is shown currently through Irvin and Tadaro, the Marathon School property. VHB and the Upper Charles Trail Committee looked at several alignments through that property when it was purchased, after the school went up. And so currently what you have right now is, with the school being there, using that buffer zone that was kind of identified during the planning review process, the site plan review process. The town purchased another small piece of property after that, so I think any trail that might go through there, the Upper Charles Trail knows, we gotta collaborate with the different groups, identifying the school committee as the first one, so. And then,
Okay.
I think thirdly, we wanna kinda go through, hopefully everybody understands what the design process will do and what it'll include and all the steps it'll include, and I think Christine was kinda gonna go, kinda summarize through that and explain how we hear all the comments and concerns, how do you address those during the design and during what design process?
Yeah, so right now in 2001, they got a MassWorks grant and to do preliminary design. I'm sure these guys
Mass
are the
Trails?
same people involved on the Hopkins School property. And they put together, they got funding to do a preliminary design stage, which basically included surveying the property, checking out environmental impacts, flagging wetlands, looking for vernal pools, any kind of, historic properties, endangered species, stuff like that, to make sure we're not impacting anybody, coming up with a preliminary alignment, and then putting together a preliminary set of plans and an estimate to go with that, to get an approximate idea of construction cost. And in doing that, I'm kind of explaining what we did there, because it's very similar to what we want to do for this next segment, which we called segment 6, that would be on the Marathon School property. This being a little bit different because you have right now a survey from when you built the school. We're hoping to kind of start with that as a base, be able to go out and stake out where the property lines are now. And then, like we said, during the planning board, they talked about a 25-foot setback where the school couldn't build, but there was using a rail trail in that, or a trail, sorry, through there was an acceptable use. So we'd go ahead and survey kind of that area. We usually get like a 40-foot swath so that we can adjust the paths back and forth, a little bit within there to avoid if there's trees or any kind of, wetlands, we might want to shift this way, shift that way, but it kind of be a range there where we can work in. And then after that, we put stakes in to kind of show the center line. The survey picks up those stakes. We take that information, put it onto our plans, the surveyed base plans, which shows all those features, and then tweak the alignment back and forth. And then we'll come back out in the field, realign the stakes so that anyone that wants to, we can take committee members, Concom agents sometimes came with us on the walks to kind of show them where the impacts are and what can be done. So when we bring that plan up to that level, and again, we can coordinate with anything new that's coming on with you guys. And then once we get to that level, kind of the same level as segment 5, we wanted to take those two units together. And again, the crossing across Hayden Row would be a part of that. So we'd take and do a final design plan at the same time for both segments and make sure we take a good look at that crossing. And that crossing, if there's a safe way to get from segment 5 to segment 6 and further that design along. So that's kind of why we're here today. That's the intent of the design process.
Yeah, and part of the design, like I touched on some of the concerns that we've heard from the school yourselves, is the proximity of the trail to the schools. Once we get the alignments in the survey out, you can start presenting and collaborating with you folks on different options for physical barriers. You can have like a physical barrier fence. You can put any numerous kind of fences. It could be topography can sometimes create barriers. Some of the natural elements of the ground could be wetlands. You could build a trail on one side of the wetlands and the school is on the other side. It just creates a natural, more buffer.
Yeah, and I did mean to mention, really the time that we're closest to the school is where the access road is, right near EMC Park. After we get by that area, which like we said, we can use security fencing, kind of fence that area off so you keep people channelized in their path and not wandering off. The slope does go down, and then you're kind of in a wooded area where you're not really even seeing the school at that point. So there is there might be a good natural separation too, so the place, it won't have to be fenced off like you're in some kind of jail when you're on the path, because there will be areas where we could still have a fence up so that defining, hey, this is, private property this way, public property that way. But maybe it won't have to be as abrasive, like a 6-foot tall chain link fence or something to separate the two. So a little bit more natural barrier the further you get away from the school.
Right, during the design process again.
Yeah.
Some other concerns that we've heard, parking, you don't want people coming onto the school parking lots to park and access the trails. So you could, create physical barriers all along the route, so that even if somebody parked there, they can't get to the bike trail from within that parcel. You'd be able to get to it from wherever it exits the different properties, EMC Park, or currently right now at the 147, where should something be built on that property, there would probably be a new entrance or something. And again, you kind of work with who's ever else using the property or not using the property, but some sort of design would take into account future uses. And the committee would poll the different, the school committee, the parks and recs, and the town manager's office, just kind of make sure you try to build or design something. You try to design something that meets everybody's concerns, that you hear from all these different public meetings that you go to. Similar to the, Main Street project. A lot of people, long time, 10-year process, design process, where we had many, many public meetings. Many of those public meetings changed the design. That design changed 3 or 4 times in a matter of 3 or 4 years. So the town follows that same process. And that's kind of why, as the Upper Charles Trail, after like 7, 8, 9 years of hard work, got this preliminary concept plan together. Now they can draw on the experience of town staff and consultants to really try to hone in on the specifics for what are the next steps once you get to a conceptual plan. Like, what are the real hard things to cross, and what are the formal approvals you need through Conservation Commission, through Planning Board, through the different, and that's kind of where we're helping them through that process, and trying to address concerns we're hearing from the public, and at the same time explain the process to boards such as yourself.
Yeah, and the committee is already busy planning different ways that we can do various kinds of outreach to the community through polling or public surveys or monthly news press releases, things like that. So we are really interested in getting feedback from the community as a whole because this is a town-wide project and we need to get feedback from everybody. And so and as we said, this is just the very, very beginning of this process. And we're really excited about moving forward and seeing what we need to continue to do.
Again, I think it's important to stress too, some of the initial input we've been getting is these outreach things are checking the box for stuff. That's sort of, it minimizes the efforts that we're all putting together here we're really outreaching to the public to find what are the concerns and what are the outputs,
and how can we improve.
And we'll take those, compile them and summarize them, and you find out where the biggest concerns are, and you work with the engineers and you work with the other
partner with
other partners like yourselves, so big stakeholders in the project, and you collaborate, you figure out what's the best option for everybody. There's no perfect plan. We find that out with all our projects, but we try to find out, what most people will enjoy and accept.
Are you looking for questions from us or tonight?
Absolutely.
Or is this just,
No.
do you just,
Of course.
How do you want to go from here?
No.
Yeah, no.
And what do we want to do from here?
Sure, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, because as Jane mentioned, I think, their committee's looking for some sort of support from the school committee, if you could
Yeah.
give it to them. So without any questions, we wouldn't expect that to happen.
I think there might be a couple of questions.
Yeah.
We did receive one email, and I know I have heard a little bit of chatter around town about the crossing of Route 85. I don't know if there's anything you want to...
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of set the conversation, because this will keep coming up, right? And they are correct that the MSBA response is expected soon. and we could be entering feasibility study for the new, for the Elmwood School project in January, right?
Yes.
So I'm concerned as a member of the ESBC too and school committee about not setting any expectations on other uses of the Tudaro property other than the school. Because I know how hard it was to find space for the Marathon School. It will be equally difficult to find space for whatever the center, the Elmwood School project becomes. And I do remember, Jane, and you mentioned that during the Marathon School planning, we did partner, the Marathon Building Committee did partner with Parks and Rec and Trails. We were at a slightly different stage then. We had an OPM and a design architect and maybe even a conceptual design at that site. But now we're at the point of, we don't even have a location yet. And I would hate to give any signal of support for other projects on a property that might be critical or the only site for our school. So I wanted to open up that conversation with the committee.
Yeah, and if I mean,
With this-
I'm sorry.
Mark?
Yeah.
Let's see what others thought.
Yeah, I think those are very, I mean, this is a huge investment in whatever the Elmwood replacement, whatever form that will take. And we have, you know, consolidated our schools for lots of reasons into a sort of extended campus. So it's obviously important that we have access to all land. I think you raise an excellent point. I'm just wondering about the timing, like, is this, is this a first let me just say, thank you for the work.
Yeah.
For, you know, here we are like 9 years in and, you know, like, oh, is there a timing issue? Like, you're like, well, I've been doing this for 9 years, right?
Nine more, or more.
But in that we're at this critical juncture, as Joe laid out, is there an opportunity for us to, like, we really need to focus on the Elmwood School replacement, that's the job that we have in front of us. Which makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to support, as Joe said, anything that would encroach on that land. So
Right.
is there a way to have this conversation later, when we're further along and knowing what we're doing with this property?
Right, and I think, I
Yeah,
didn't
let-
mention, I don't know if I mentioned the
I was just gonna
mass-
give
All right, go ahead.
the time. There's, through the chair, I think the ideal answer to that is, you know, the proposed layout will focus on using no build areas offset from the property line. That, you know, you're not gonna be able to use for anything anyway. But a path or a trail is an allowable use. It's a path, considers it, I'm not sure if it's a passive or an active
In the setback area.
recreation. So it's in this setback area where, you know, from the property lines.
You can't do
And a bike
anything
trail
with it
can,
anyway.
you know, follow that property line around the entire property if need be. So during like the design process, again, I'll go on this design process, there's a lot of steps involved in there and they include continued collaboration, another big word we'll keep using, with all the potential uses on that and the, you know, the stakeholders involved. So should something during your feasibility study, you know, be looking at that property as one of the properties, you're not be able to use that space anyway. That's why, like, along, it's a tight corner around from EMC Park to the Marathon School. We kind of walk that site, but you do have that offset from the existing kind of curb line. It's a challenging area, but, you know, VHB, you know, I walked it with Matt, who's not here. They have ideas. They've done stuff through as challenging locations. So again, it's in the area that, wouldn't it be used? And then the timing for the design, at this town meeting, Upper Charles Trail Committee will be asking for design funds for final and preliminary design for segments 5 and 6. So assuming those get approved, you have to get an engineer on board, you have to do survey in all those areas. That design process would start in you know, Christine, it would start maybe next year, 2023,
Yeah, the Mass
get
Trails
through
grant.
where we, and
Yeah.
again, we're submitting for Mass Trails grant, which also we have to wait until June to
Before
find
June,
out.
yeah, nothing will happen before June of 22, and then at that point, like he's saying, we do survey and kind of the staking and kind of, it's very like a preliminary type of design.
And that design process can go for 12,
Probably,
12
yeah, it's
months
gonna
to
be the
18
12
months.
months that we have the grant for. So that would probably get done somewhere 22, between 22 and 23, before we then wanna move on to final design.
and then final design takes another,
Year.
another year, so you now
Because we have
into
to get
24.
NOIs, like
So-
environmental permitting, and there's a lot of stuff that,
So
you know,
any-
takes time.
So when you say 5 and 6, and I'm looking at your map.
Oh,
that's
good,
the
because
the
we were like,
yellow-
where's our map?
There's the yellow line, that's
Yeah.
the one that we're talking about. I think
Yes.
that's- There's the blue line, that is.
The
on
blue
other
lines are the
side.
segments that have
5 and
already
6.
been built
On this
or
one.
under construction.
On the packet,
Wish we
in the packet.
had that map.
I
You
know.
what they're looking at?
This
Sorry.
This segment right here.
Nancy, can I speak a
Go,
moment?
go ahead, Leah.
So I have, a couple of concerns. One of them is probably gonna sound a little alarmist, but Marathon is our youngest school. Okay, so for adults to get near the children in the Marathon area, they go through a bunch of checks, right? A bunch of background checks, a bunch of, checks to make sure that they are safe around our children. If you have a trail going that close to Marathon School, it has the potential, and I say potential because, I don't necessarily think this will happen, but it has the potential of allowing adults who have not been cleared properly close to the youngest children in our schools. And that, to me, is a bit of a concern. And secondly, I was wondering in the 11, we have a map that was put into our drive, like from 1124, and it has a Western alternative.
Right.
And why isn't the Western alternative considered a feasible choice?
That's what I was asking as well, Leah. The blue, what I see is the blue one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
is
there's-
that-
There's a very detailed map.
Is that
has
not
a
our
Western
map?
alternative.
That's not
I don't
our
think
map.
it's our map, so
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys,
Who's map?
I don't know how you guys would
It's,
get
the
that
Trails
map.
Club presented
Maybe
it.
Peter knows how he would.
But we do
It's a
not,
publicly available map that was presented last night, so.
Oh, no, but I know, but this committee didn't submit that
didn't
map for you
reckon-
folks for
we-
discussion, so we don't know what you're
it
looking
has
at.
not been presented to our committee, so we cannot.
And again, that was discussed
Talk
at
to
length
it.
yesterday,
good.
as to not, maybe Joe knows how it got in there.
Okay, okay, thanks.
That's fair. We were not aware of the
Yeah,
source
it-
of
we have
the
not-
material.
They have not asked to come before our committee to present this formally, so we have no comment on it.
But, and,
Well, you'd be willing to look at it, I guess. For example, if we find, as we get into design on the Tadaro property, the spaces that you looked at that could be suitable for trail, we find there's wetlands considerations. In other parts of Tadaro, we need the full space, and we need that for a sidewalk that the schools own. You'd be willing, you might find yourself in a situation of looking at a Plan B, even though you've got your plan set now on this
Yeah,
conceptual
and again,
plan.
through the chair, through Jane, from last night, summarizing what Jane's comments were, the committee's gonna hear all these concerns, and they have, and they take it back and they look at different alternatives. They're gonna be looking at alternatives for the crossings, because those were concerns, focused on concerns. They've been looking at different options for not being on Hayden Row, but that's where they're shown right now. That's the beauty of a concept plan, and we always try to, just because we present a plan, it becomes concrete, and it's not. And I'll go back to the Main Street project, I can show you 12 different designs that get presented at public meetings, and they will change. And I know Upper Charles has reached out, they've had public meetings, they will collaborate with folks. They've looked at that plan that you have as a blue plan, and it crossed private property, and they had contact with specific property owners along that route, and specific property owners, when they were going through their analysis, which you were at the meeting last night, analysis has 20 different topics to it, right?
Yes.
Where you use all of those topics to rank all the different alternatives that you've looked at. And they hit a roadblock. And then it just happened to be at the same timing where the town purchased this property that's at our, and now they can look at, you know, as they were asked to do, find this path on town property. Because we had a couple people at the meeting last night where they live on Hayden Row, where that section of path goes along their property. They're pretty adamant that, you know, we don't like the idea that you even shown a line in front of my property where I might need an easement. So I'm not gonna give you an easement. I'm not gonna give you any property. I don't want the bike trail on my property. So when you hit those roadblocks, the committee did what they were supposed to do, investigated other alternatives, and they've come to that new proposal that they have now. It was less impacts to wetlands, it was less costly. The downfall is, yeah, you had to cross Hayden Row at an existing crosswalk at EMC. And there was a lot of, you know, discussion last night about the safety of crosswalks and the history on Hayden Row. Hesitant to go there last night. At some point, we're gonna have to go there. There's been accidents on Hayden Row. A fatality was brought up, but it wasn't at a crossing. And I don't even want to talk about it in respect for the family. There was a EMC accident with a carriage, a baby carriage. The cars were all stopped. There was a distracted driver from behind that hit somebody from behind and pushed the car, but there was no fatality. That type of, I don't know what to call it, fear. You know, sidewalks are dangerous. They're the closest thing to the traffic that you have nowadays. They might be 2 or 3 feet away from trucks and traffic and everything. As Jane said,
However,
we have those engineers here to try to design the safest, whatever technology is available. Here in Hopkinton, we always go over and above on, you know, this is usually the minimum and the minimum requirement. That's never acceptable here in Hopkinton. We look for different alternatives. We don't just look for the standard, the norm. We want to present something. VHB wanted to present a whole bunch of 9 or 10 different signal types and active and passive roadway notification systems. But last night, we didn't want to get into
We didn't get
that much
into a lot of
detail.
detail
Right.
last night. I would just like to throw this out just as a comparison. Everybody who was at the meeting and all the emails that I've received, everybody loves the trails, Milford, Holliston Trail, they all love them. There hasn't been many incidents over there. I'd also like to point to the fact that Milford, who is probably, you know, it's been around for 25 years now, has 4 entrances and exits that are right at the base of 495 without any incident. And we're talking about crossing Route 85? I mean,
Right.
I think we have to be realistic here. And yes, we can and be safe about this with proper planning and proper investigation. I don't think we have to be afraid of this. I think we should embrace it and figure out how we can make it acceptable and accessible for everybody. And it's a wonderful opportunity to open it up to the whole school district, to the center trail, to the downtown area, even if we're not successful in getting the north and the south parcels, because they are currently under discussions for, we are trying to get our easements and we are trying to get property on the north and, well, that's why we can't go there yet, because those haven't been done. But this is something that we can do now. We can move forward as a town. And we can have this wonderful, beautiful standalone unit. If nothing else happens, this would be an awesome, awesome opportunity to embrace and have a school campus connector. Just think of it. How many cities and towns do you know of that can have a whole trail system that connect all of their schools together? It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. And we haven't even begun to think about accessibility. You know, there's potentials where the school could access the trail if there was a one-way lock system. You could have gates, you could have all kinds of safety features. We haven't even begun to look at this. This is just very, very preliminary.
So I just have a couple questions if I can. If you are crossing Hayden Row would it look like the crosswalk at EMC?
That would be a answer for, that's what the engineer.
It would be more enhanced.
Yeah.
You'd have much more advanced notification as well as notification right at the crossing.
Yeah, and the overhead system that I think that we were gonna try to show, last night was, they're building one in Main Street.
looks like this.
So you guys will see it. It, instead of just being a little flashing light on the side of the road, it goes up, hangs over the road, and has a pedestrian, like, flashing sign. So it's like, you know, hey, no one's gonna miss that. No one's gonna, you know, not know that that's there.
And the intent, the committee's intent isn't to say, now it's safe. I mean,
No,
this is
a
what.
crossing is a crossing.
This is the best and available, and we'll look at all the different options. And even to Joe's point, if we can't find something that, you know, that the committee considers safe, and we're gonna continue to look for different alternatives for minimize the crossings, because the community has spoken, we heard it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the issue, sorry, with the crossings, from a school perspective, is safety and traffic. Because,
Right.
I mean, we have an enormous traffic problem, and when it is time for a school, and we have the buses, and we have the high school drivers, and we have parents doing drop-off, these three crossings are exactly where all of our 4,000 kids worth of families are, you know, all passing through this space. You know, I live, you know, on the Holliston side down Chestnut. You know, I know that I've seen school buses can't even make the turn from Chestnut to 85 because it's not wide enough. So you're always swinging into another lane. The idea of having a biker anywhere in that stretch, unless we're gonna widen it, I mean, I don't know. But aside from that, even if you can get all the buses and the cars in the space, if somebody then hits a light and everything has to come to a standstill for a biker, there's just no way our kids are gonna get to school on time. And so we already had issues with that this year. So from a school committee perspective, I personally, I think Dr. Kavanaugh too, has concern about traffic. And, you know, anything that we put in this stretch of 85 from Chestnut to the center of town that is not creating more throughput is a problem for the schools.
Yeah, and so I guess in addition to the Tadaro property and the potential to slow traffic even further in that area, my one other worry is if I'm a person and I'm coming to use the trails, I need to put my car somewhere. And if we think about the parking lots that exist on Hayden Rose Street, they are school parking lots. And our parking is already, I would say, taxed and strained in some of our buildings. I mean, at the Marathon School, we had to thwart a grievance this year because teachers couldn't get in and out of that parking lot just because of the congestion already. So I would worry that people would come and say, well, here's a spot to put my car, and people would park cars there during regular school hours, and that might exacerbate our problem. So I do wonder what it is that we could do to keep people out of public school parking lots. It just doesn't feel like
Sure, that's a very good
it's helpful
question.
to us.
And I know that I've seen this problem handled in other areas because you can engage your police department and the select board so that they can, you know, authorize certain signage and other warnings so that, and they can patrol it so that it can be done. I mean, you already use stickers for the high school seniors who are using it. There are multiple ways that you can control that.
Can I give some?
That increases the cost to the school, right? So if we have to have people monitoring the parking lots all the time to determine if somebody has their sticker at a higher rate than we normally do, because we don't know when people will be coming in and out of the trails, then you're increasing the cost to the school.
I
So,
suggest
Nancy,
that's
could
a
I,
very good
through the
question.
chair, could I just suggest, I don't think we're here to try to find solutions
Exactly.
to issues.
That's
Because
true.
we don't even know what we need on the Tadaro site, or whether we can even accommodate a trail. But I would like, through you, I mean, I think we should thank the Upper Charles Trail for being here. And we do want to stay tuned with this public conversation that Upper Charles Trail is having, so that once we do have a project manager, hopefully we get into feasibility, get a project manager and start figuring out what our needs are for the schools, we will be aware of the needs of Upper Charles Trail as well. And hopefully you'll be further along in the public discussion as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, we should be entering
It's a
into
process.
feasibility very soon, so.
But I think it's important, like, I think from a school committee perspective, there is certainly the Upper Charles Trail process, but the traffic is a separate issue. Safety, as Leah brought up, is a separate issue. And the fourth issue that, for me, from a school perspective, is I think as we consider barriers for that trail to kind of separate, potentially to address the safety concerns, I do think that there are a number of students who walk from like Blueberry Lane and come through on the backside through the, you know, through, I just wouldn't want to impede walkers to the school as well. So just before we close, I think there is some issues that the school committee probably cares about.
And I think that's what this is all about. It's an
Yeah.
ongoing discussion, and that's what kind of opened with it. We hope it's a collaborative effort. Certainly, we do want the best and the safest, and not only for our schools, but for our surrounding recreation facilities
Yeah, I mean,
that attract.
I agree, Jane, and I think we all love the trails. I mean, I love the center trail. When I run, I see some students ride their bike up Center School to get to Hopkins, so.
Yeah, the
We only
point
wanna
is to
make it
get rid of
better.
the cars and have more people walking to school.
Right.
Well, we'd be all for it.
Solve
believe
your
me.
traffic problem.
Well, thank you for coming in and
Thanks very much.
Well, thank you for,
giving us the update.
yes, you're very welcome, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us.
Yeah, thanks.
Nice to see you.
Yes, and we will continue our outreach and our transparency, and looking forward to seeing you again.
Great, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, you as well.
Thank you for breaking this.
Yes, yes,
I would-
we appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. I would like a motion to re-enter into executive session for the purposes. Motion by Meg, second by Joe. We'll start with you, Leah.
Aye.
Joe.
Hi.
Meg.
Aye.
Amanda. I am also an aye. We are back into executive session at 8:18.
Right.